Just as I had had the feeling I was safe, it was immediately taken away. The thought passed through my head that my dad probably had a pocket knife on him. My heart sank. I knew this thing could hear my thoughts. I knew what it would try to do. The next thing I knew, I was on my feet, leaping for my dad. My body hit his. Luckily, he's in pretty good shape for his age, and he had no problems putting me in my place. He got on top of me and pinned me to the ground, all while I could barely hear my mom in the background, yelling at my dad to be careful. My dad knew something was going on and that I just needed to be on the ground until I calmed down. My body tried to flail, but it wasn't successful. The whole time, the voice in my head, now yelling and screaming, not saying any distinguishable words, but just having what felt like a tantrum. What made my dad the most uncomfortable was the kicking feeling coming from my stomach. After a couple of minutes, the voice calmed down, and I felt in charge of my body again. My dad slowly got up and attempted to help me up. At this point, with an audience of hospital staff that looked like they were getting ready to take me somewhere for more tests. Just as I stood up straight, I felt the voice take over and I lost all sense of my own body. I felt like a shell of myself. My dad gave me a soft yet worried smile, and in that instant I grabbed him and reached into his pocket. My heart sank as I felt his pocket knife. The room started to panic and about 5 people tried to grab it from me. The last thing I remember is plunging the knife into my stomach. I felt a blinding pain and everything went black. Several hours later, I started to wake up. Everything was extremely blurry and fuzzy. I could hear a very faint voice telling me to relax. As the minutes passed by, things started to become a little bit clearer. I looked around and saw that I was in a large room with a few other patients. A nurse was going up to all the beds and checking in on them. I tried to sit up a bit to get more comfortable and noticed an incredible sourness in my stomach. Several hours later, I started to wake up. Everything was extremely blurry and fuzzy. I could hear a very faint voice telling me to relax. As the minutes passed by, things started to become a little bit clearer. I looked around and saw I was in a large room with a few other patients. A nurse was going up to all the beds and checking in on them. I tried to sit up a bit to get more comfortable and noticed an incredible sourness in my stomach. I moved my hospital gown out of the way and saw a huge scar, about 6 inches across. Most of the scare looked very surgical, like what I'd imagine a C-section surgery would look like, except where I remembered the knife going in. It looked like a bunch of extra stitches had to be added where it went in. It also looked pretty bruised. I can imagine what a dull 10-year-old knife that was harshly shoved into my body really wouldn't cut cleanly and leave some damage. The feeling of shock from looking at my stomach was quickly gone when I realized that meant whatever was in me was now gone. I didn't hear the voice. I didn't feel a hand in my gut anymore. I didn't see that vile kicking anymore. I felt like I could breathe. I asked the nurse what I found and she looked flush. That's something that your doctor will talk with you once you eat something and can speak clearly, she said, and as she scurried off looking upset. Shortly after that, I was wheeled into a recovery room and my parents came to see me. As they walked in, they had a very similar look on their faces as the nurse did. They looked pale and didn't want to look me in the eye. I kept asking them questions about what was going on, but they said the doctor needed to discuss it with me and he wanted to make sure I wasn't feeling high from the anesthesia while we had a conversation. The doctor didn't come and see me for another 10 hours, which felt strange. And to add to the strangeness, my parents were taking shifts hanging out with me. There was only overlap when they switched and the other parent took over while the other one left the room. I would understand if they weren't both with me for the whole time. I'm not that needy. But they were only both in the room together for about an hour. That was the hour before the doctor came to my room. Finally, the doctor came in to talk to me. When he walked in, the room was cold and quiet. It was evident he didn't feel the same relief I was feeling. He seemed awkward, like he was talking way too long to get over to me. He grabbed a chair and scooted it close to me. "Listen, Sam, I know this last 24 hours has been very challenging. I apologize for not explaining what happened during your surgery sooner, but we all needed time to figure it out and, quite frankly, process what happened. We feel we have enough information to let you in on what is going on." A silence filled the room. I felt like no one was brave enough to break it. "And?" I said with confusion. "I think it'll be easier if we just show you." The doctor, along with my parents, helped me into a wheelchair, and we started to make our way across the hospital to an entirely different section. I couldn't believe all the things running through my head at what we were about to see. It felt like cruel and unusual punishment to leave me in anticipation and not just tell me what I was about to see. When I went around the corner, I couldn't process what I was looking at. I thought they were showing me a large tumor or growth of some kind. But why would a tumor be in a big incubation chamber with tubes connected to IVs and machines coming out of it? As I got closer, I started to see human features on it. It was mostly just a 6-pound lump of flesh, but I could see a hand sticking out of it. It was small, but what made it creepy was it looked like a fully developed man's hand, just small. I could see a patch of hair coming out of what I assumed was its head. It had no discernible facial features, just a few teeth scattered in one section. As I looked at it with disgust, coming to terms with this thing that was just in my body, I had a realization. I wasn't feeling sick at the thought of something being in my body. Sure, I was grossed out that this particular thing was just in me, but the thought of the bacteria in my body didn't make me want to throw up. I thought about all the blood pumping through my veins, and I felt normal. Not only was the voice and kicking gone, but my OCD was gone too. I didn't have a mental illness. It was just this thing, trying to find its way out for years. As I was staring at the creature, the doctor came and put his hand on my shoulder. "We believe this is your twin brother." I immediately looked up at my parents, who looked very disturbed and upset. I let the doctor finish talking. "We believe that you absorbed him in the womb and that he has been living inside you your whole life. This is an extremely rare condition called fetus in fetu. It seems he didn't quite have the best opportunity to develop normally. That's why he looks the way he does. Despite his appearance, he has all the organs he needs to survive. Looks like he's missing a lung and his gallbladder. Also a piece of his liver, but other than that, it looks like he will live for at least a few years. He won't be able to leave this room due to him needing a feeding tube and a few other things that his body cannot do on its own. He needs lots of support just to live. What makes this situation extremely unique is that your twin is still alive despite your body not sustaining him anymore. Even though we have him hooked up to a few IVs and machines, it is unexplainable how he is living while outside of your body." I was in complete shock. I didn't want to believe it. I asked my mom why she never told me I absorbed my twin in the womb. She said she had no clue. There was never a sign when she was pregnant with me. He also mentioned that sometimes, even in pregnancies, women will go their whole pregnancy without even getting a belly. It's called a cryptic pregnancy. I've always had a bit of a gut, but never anything big enough to cause suspicion. I guess in my case, I had a fetus fetu and an experience similar to a cryptic pregnancy, even though it was in my stomach. At least that's what the doctor's best guess. Although it all sounded like BS to me. The doctor and my parents kept trying to explain more and more details. I don't know why they didn't slow down a little for my sake. How could they not tell I wasn't processing any of this? I noticed something while they were trying to explain things to me. They kept calling it a he. Now listen, I'm not some kind of asshole that won't respect someone who wants to be called a specific pronoun. I've never been that kind of person, but this is where I draw the line. Not just that, but this thing had a name. My parents named it and said today was its birthday. While they told me all this information, they didn't look happy about it. They seemed like they were forced to do all this nonsense. And now it was my turn to be convinced. I could tell they were trying to force it. The doctor told me, despite it not having a high probability for a long life, that we should still try and give it the love it deserves. Of course, the doctor referred to it as a he, but I refused to. This disgusted me. This thing tried to kill me and ruined my quality of life for so long, and now we are going to treat it like it's some kind of prince? Absolutely not. Luckily, it seemed like it would never leave the hospital, but my parents planned on going to visit it daily. Visiting it? Are you kidding me? It has no eyes, no ears. It's probably miserable and has no concept of people even being around it. I'm refusing to ever see this thing again or acknowledge its existence again. I could get in trouble for even talking about this. The hospital or anyone involved has signed NDAs to not share any information about this until it officially dies. This is because it's a medical anomaly and the first of its kind. They want to do the proper research on how all this occurred before coming out with a statement. I just have to get this all off my chest. I feel like I'm the crazy one here when I know I'm not. I don't care if I get in trouble. I am scared that the doctors are trying to force my parents into giving this thing a proper life. I think that's why it took them so long to tell me. I think they scared my parents into keeping it alive and guilting them or even forcing them into being its parent. I'm all for every life being important and all that stuff, but I have a feeling my parents are terrified of this thing just like I am. I am convinced they gaslit my parents into believing this thing is my brother. If there wasn't any sign of him while my mom was pregnant with me, could this thing be something else? This all happened about 2 years ago. It's still alive and they are still researching it. My parents continue to visit it despite everything. My therapist told me that I'm probably just struggling with jealousy now that I'm not an only child anymore and so much of my parents' attention is on him now. But it's so much bigger than just jealousy. Since this thing showed up and my OCD is pretty much gone, I've hardly seen my parents. I know I'm not just jealous. There is something more to this. I know it. Something just feels so off about this whole thing. What is this thing? Where did it come from? And what does it want?